I grew up learning to always solve problems around me. And I was very curious about, okay, so how do we get this from this stage to that stage? And then at some point it was for me about, okay, how do we start optimizing these processes? Whenever I go to places, I'm like, oh, I think we can build a bridge from this part of the street to the other part, so, and I think when you do that, you can see not just problems around you, but problems that are actually value. So we have a lot of problems, but in reality, it means we have a lot of value.
This is a story of a man driven by necessity. A story of teamwork. A story of taking a chance. A story of confronting a challenge, not just for his family, but for every student, every home, and every business. From Ogu local government area of Enugu State, but beginning his journey in the Plateau State capital, where he was born in 1994, his early life was not without challenges. The third of 5 brilliant children, Chukwuemeka Nwangele, fondly called Maxwell, graduated top of the electrical engineering department at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in 2017. Welcome to another episode of Eastern Promises here on Afia TV. I am Nathalie Oku, and today we're going to be discussing a prominent figure in energy systems. We have in our midst Emeka Maxwell Nwangele, who developed a passion for energy, renewable energy, green energy at a very young age when, of course, he was, shall we say, confronted with a local challenge. But within that challenge, he was able to find a solution that has sustained him to this very moment. Emeka, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Natalie.
Thank you for, making out time from your busy schedule. So we're looking at someone who is not just, you don't just come up with solutions. You have basically thrilled and excited the world. You are a Rhodes Scholar. You basically have used that knowledge to start to pursue a PhD at the University of Oxford. You've come a long way. But beyond what we see outside, beyond these impressive energy systems, tell us about your background.
That's a very interesting question. So I'm from here, but I was born in Jos. So in Jos, if you have ever spent time in the north in the early 90s/2000s, it was one of the best places in Nigeria to grow. Sadly, today Enugu is the best place to be. But yeah, so I stayed there, did like all of my primary school and junior secondary school there. But then in 2008, there was this crisis, this inter-religious crisis, and my dad was shot in the arm. And then at that point, I had to move to Enugu. And then came down to Enugu, finished, like high school, and then sort of naturally went to the University of Nigeria to study electrical engineering, which is interesting because at the time I was, thinking between engineering and medicine and surgery. Because everyone was like, oh, you're very smart, go and become a doctor, be the family's doctor, etc. And I was like, it's kind of boring. I mean, I have a lot of doctor friends, but then I chose engineering because I had seen like real time some of the problems we faced, especially in Nigeria. Like growing up, my dad's business was always threatened because of the lack of electricity access. And whenever his business was threatened in terms of lower revenues, then the family was threatened. He would get, annoyed. He would transfer the anger to me. I would get chased back home, for not paying my school fees, etc. So that was painful. And I was like, how do we solve these kinds of problems? So it was from a deeply personal, space. And then that led me to electrical engineering at the University of Nigeria. And then while studying electrical engineering, I met some equally passionate people, probably more passionate than I am, who wanted to sort of address the same problem. They faced it from different sort of angles. And then we decided to create this company, Greenage Technologies, that has now grown from being like a really tiny sort of garage, store, to now being like partners with the Enugu state government, with Oxford University, with Innovate UK, with UNIDO, with USADF, etc. I mean, sometimes I forget, some of the partners we have until I receive some emails and I'm like, oh yes, we need to do something here.
Tell us about the moments growing up when you would sit in the dark, I would assume with a lantern, for instance, and your father would probably be angry because of one thing or another external factor. Tell us about the moments where you dreamed of being able to provide some kind of solution for your immediate family.
So I think, to be fair, and again, thanks to my parents, right? I grew up learning to always solve problems around me. So at the time, his factory was just besides where we were living. So even as kids, we were, going to the factory to help to produce like soap at the time. So I grew up sort of seeing processes happen. And I was very curious about, okay, so how do we get this from this stage to that stage? And then at some point it was for me about, okay, how do we start optimizing these processes? And the moment I was able to figure out that, oh, if you did this, you can reduce the number of workers you need from 4 to 3. And then I sold that to him. And initially he was like, oh no, this is not going to work. You don't know anything about this. And then one day he left the house. And then by the time he came back, I had done the work that 3 people needed to do. I did it alone. And he was very efficient. I actually enjoyed doing it that way. I think since then it became sort of a thing with me where whenever I go to places, I'm like, oh, I think we can put the bridge from this part of the street to the other part, So, and I think when you do that, you can see not just problems around you, but problems that are actually value. And that's one, thing that we tend to miss a lot in Nigeria. So we have a lot of problems, but in reality, it means we have a lot of value, like a lot.
So you got to those milestones in your life where you basically got the confidence. You knew you could make decisions that had lasting impact.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, we're sitting, this is Esut Abani,
Yeah.
and this is the Department of Management Sciences, and your system is powering this entire faculty.
Yeah.
Could you speak to us about how this system works and other parts of the state, other parts of the Southeast region that are currently feeling the impact of greenage?
Yeah, so this particular one is home to me because when I was in UNN, at the time, Professor Zumba was vice chancellor. Sometimes, power goes out for like 3 months because the school was owing or some funny thing was happening. It wasn't anybody's fault. It's just when you grow up, you begin to realize how much little resources we have to run institutions. So, for instance, on average, Oxford University uses an annual budget of about £3 billion. That's about as much as, probably more than Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Education. So that gives you kind of a scale of the problem, right? So it's not anyone's fault. But then again, students suffer. So without access to electricity, you live in those places where maybe when it's like heat season, you're unable to sleep at night. You wake up in the morning, because you couldn't sleep, you can't really understand what's happening in the lecture hall. Again, you don't have internet, you cannot actually study or do proper research, and things like that. So for me, when I left sort of the school system, it still remained home to me. I refuse to go back to lecture, but I'll do that maybe when I'm much older. But I've always kept thinking about, okay, how do we, really improve this? So once I was in Oxford grabbing drinks with Ike Chioke, the MD of AfriInvest, who is also very good friends with Enugu State as well. And then he talked about this, his friend, Bernd Bergmer, who is like the owner of a really large communications conglomerate in the US, and said that this man wants to, do some philanthropic projects in Nigeria. And I was like, hey, we're both from Enugu State. We have to bring this to Enugu. And he was like, okay, so how exactly do we do this? I was like, we have to sell the story of electricity and connectivity to him. And he asked me to just put up like the documents. And I was like, okay, that's good. So I went and checked up about this man, saw the kinds of things that, interest him, and then put everything together. And within a few days, actually, it got approved. Because again, we had like a sort of direct sort of connections with him. And the man was very excited, the monies were paid. And then what we did was sort of immediately, deploy the system. So this is like a 100% clean energy solution with solar panels on the roof. It's about 140 kilowatts. So that provides enough power to be able to power this, entire institution. And then we have like inverters that basically convert the DC power coming from the solar panels into AC power. And then they also are in charge of sort of charging the batteries as well. So we have the PV, the inverters, and the batteries. And then all of those work together in sync to provide energy whenever there's demand. And then when there's no demand, it just charges the batteries and makes sure that the building is sort of self-sustaining.
But after long nights spent waiting in silence for power to return while in Jos, he refused to wait for the future of energy. He chose to build it. At the Enugu State University of Science and Technology, Abani, his power systems have brought lights to formerly dark lecture halls at the Faculty of Management Sciences. Okay, so this is where we're going from. Is this the one? Okay. But I'm sure this one too can be powered on, right?
All of them actually.
Okay. Let's go.
So if you look, if you come here at night,
yeah,
the whole place is like lit.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So it charges all day. Yes. What happens when it rains? Like when it's been raining all day, does that affect how much power you're able to retain?
It won't affect how much you're able to retain. But in our modeling, we factored for some of the sort of high rain days.
Yeah.
So for instance, this is an entire auditorium.
Yeah.
With maybe 20 fans.
Okay.
There's multiple light points. And it powers the entire thing. We can actually carry more equipment here. So assuming we had like smart boards.
All of that.
Or some demonstration equipment, some laptops, etc. These are some of the things we actually factored in originally, sort of for this place.
If I had a public address system, then I'll be able to address the class using the system.
100%.
This is
You'll
great.
probably be very good at addressing the class.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well done.
This is basically the entire faculty, as you can see.
Yeah.
It's just self-sufficient now. And I think this is what pretty much everywhere deserves.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the energy source is, but everywhere and everyone deserves to have some level of self-sufficiency in terms of energy or electricity. Not just schools, I mean like hospitals. I was at the orthopedic hospital once when I broke my leg. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's okay. Someone was being operated on, and the power went out, and everyone started shouting, "Blood of Jesus!" And I'm like, "Yes, blood of Jesus, but this is actually a human problem.
That's right.
It's actually something we can solve, and not. You don't need to invoke,
and this is not a natural disaster. This is man-made.
Exactly. So I think for that reason, I think people just need to really always think about quick solutions. And this, we can talk a lot about some of these things.
So I'd like to go to, maybe call it Santa's workshop, where all of this power is coming from. Great. Now, what might seem like a small change, one faculty lit, a few devices charged, has become a symbol of possibility, a tidal wave even powerful enough to support a telecoms mast.
Where we have the power room,
okay,
which is quite interesting. Basically, at the heart of the building, this sort of labels out the entire sort of system, and then you can see who the donor was. Burned.
That's like warning you that this is very cautious territory.
Yeah, this place was designed to really international standards.
You can see that
with safety, caution, and basically interconnectivity. Oh, nice, Isaac. You're here. How are you doing, man?
Hi, Isaac. Hi, nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure.
Meet Isaac, one of my colleagues and partners at Greenage Technologies.
All right, nice to meet you.
He actually did lead this entire set of installation, and he put all of this from ground to top in like less than a week.
This is impressive, but we need evidence of it being less than a week because we need that.
Yeah.
We need that because this looks like 6 months worth of work. Wow.
But basically, this building is housing sort of the control, the storage units for the 140 kilowatts PV system. And this PV system is powering the entire faculty of management sciences that houses over 3,000 students.
So when you say PV, Could you break that down for the layman?
PV is just solar. PV just stands for photovoltaic.
All right.
So essentially, it's just converting UV rays from the sun into DC power, and then we convert the DC power to AC power that then sort of electrifies your home using your conventional devices.
So for this system, for instance, you import this system and then you install.
These specific ones were imported from our partners, but then I'll take you to the factory later and then show you some of the ones that we make ourselves,
All right.
that we also install as well.
Okay, so could you show us how each of them works? So just one, maybe we can.
Let's see what Isaac is working
Isaac,
on.
exactly. So Isaac, maybe you can help demonstrate so we see how it actually works. If it's something that this client would like to also install.
Yeah, so basically for a solar system like this, you have three main components. You have the solar panel, which is on the roof. You have the inverter that converts the DC to alternating current that you can use with your appliances. Then you have the storage system. So this particular system is a 12 kilowatt.
12 kilowatts.
Each. All the systems that you're seeing are synchronized to work as a single unit to power the whole faculty.
All right.
Yeah.
And it's very good that you synchronize them, because if anything happens to one unit, the entire system keeps working.
So it's not like if one thing happens to one unit, it doesn't disrupt the other
No,
units.
it
Because I was
doesn't.
actually wondering
Yeah.
about that. So
Yeah.
it keeps on.
So we
Keeps on
just
going.
get the notification that one of them is down.
How do you
Then
get
we
the
send an
notification?
email.
Yeah, so if you look at the software that I'm using currently,
Okay.
you can see the state of it, and you can see that power is coming from the solar panel. So the battery is 100% fully charged. If you have any problem from this particular dashboard, I will know,
Okay.
and I'll send it in.
So it's tamper-proof then?
Yeah.
Tamper-proof.
And if you look around, you see that we have a surveillance system. If this is 45, look at this burglary. There is one in the room.
Yeah.
45.
That's great. So obviously we have a number of systems here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9
Yeah.
here. For a private residence,
Yeah.
how many of these would be needed? If I just imagine I were a client and I just needed one, or just my house to be powered, how many of these would I need?
You probably need one.
Just one.
Yeah.
And I won't be able to sell power from there.
We will take you to where power is already stored.
Okay.
With a system that is smaller than one of this.
All right. That's impressive. I can't wait to see the factory then.
Yeah, you'd be really impressive actually to see this. I remember when Obiora came to the factory back in the day, and you know.
Is that Monsignor Obiora AK? Okay, great.
Obiora is a good friend.
Ah, okay. That's
So-
he's a good friend of Afia TV as well, so.
I can imagine. Yeah. So I remember when he came, initially he was like, no, it's not possible, but I'll come and see it. And then when he came, he was like, oh, have you met this person? Send me this, and all of that, yeah. So I think you'll be quite happy.
All right, so let's take a look at it then.
Perfect.
I like how you talked about everything and people coming together to ensure the success of your business in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I want you to tell us as briefly as you possibly can how you were able to connect the building blocks, because people watching this will be wondering, why not me? Or some people would ask God when. So how were you able to connect the building blocks to emerge as being one of the faces of this industry?
To be fair to the people who ask God when, I used to ask the same question too, so it's not a strange thing to ask. But I think we need to be patient enough. But before being patient, really believe very deeply in what we want to do. So if you have a very, very strong belief and you're patient, I think it was one of the partners at Y Combinator, that says there's nothing that beats the power of compounding. So if you want to be like a really, really good engineer and you spend enough time sort of doing this thing, if you've been to Barcelona, there's this really famous building called the Sagrada Familia that was designed by Antoni Gaudi. He worked on this very specific project for about 44 years of his life. So imagine building, like a house that it takes you 44 years to build, not because you didn't have resources, but just because you really wanted this to be wholesome, right? So I think what people need to do is to believe in something. It doesn't have to be a particular thing. It could be a philosophy. It could be a way of thinking. And actually, follow through with that thing, Because when you do, you find that you build incredible networks just by giving out really good quality work. So for instance, it was easy for me to convince Ike Chioke because we had done some work with him previously. and it was really good quality. And till today, whenever he's with people and talking about energy, he messages or he calls and is like, hey, there's this thing we need to do here. What do you think? So I think people need to be patient, really believe in what you're doing, and then also, I think don't take away from doing really good quality stuff, which is something that I think sometimes frustrates me a lot. Many people are very shabby in the kinds of work they do, and I think we just need to sort of turn a leaf in that sort of area.
That's right. Now, when you talk about support, what level or what kind of support have you received from the Southeast government? What kind of support have you received from other business moguls? What kind of support have you received from your friends? Tell us about the chain of support.
Yeah, support is very interesting. So we did the very first sort of large commercial system. Large at the time was 500K. That we sold was bought by Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi at the trade fair in Nsukka. I remember very well because I just had an accident then and I was still walking with crutches. And we were able to convince him to buy this for his mother. I think that was the first time we held that much cash that belonged to the business. But then we did grow, from there. At some point, Kingsley Eze from Tennessee, you probably know them very well, did invest some money in our business at the time when we just didn't know our left from our right. And we're still, I remembered him very well saying, this your product is tacky, but I was still investing, in it. Because he saw young guys that had, belief and wanted to do something really cool. Again, beyond then, we did get support from Olon, for instance, that invest in a lot of energy projects. From USADF, sadly, they've been sort of shut down now. And then more recently from Innovate UK and the University of Oxford, UNIDO, which is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And, the thing about this, again, is, is the compounding, right? So at each phase, it becomes much easier for you to sort of mobilize the support you need for the next phase. But if you're not patient enough to do the sort of ones you could do early enough, the sort of much larger scale support will, always elude you. But I think also at this point, I was going to say, since this current administration came into power, I felt like Enugu State has never been more home. Because, as, basic things as, oh, Your Excellency, we're building this really large factory. The road leading to it is not, good. I told him and he was like, okay, we'll fix it. For me, that's really, instructive in terms of what leadership is supposed to be. So I would say we've been, supported enough. I think we've probably been some of the most fortunate. There's more things that could happen. We could, drive more partnerships through the Southeast Development Commission, for instance, do more work with other organizations like the Rural Electrification Agency, federal government, etc. But we are working, a lot in some of these directions. And I think a lot of them will become very fruitful very soon.
All right. Now, let's talk about the operations.
Yeah.
For instance, people would want to ask if you are the one making the systems, if you are importing the systems, what company are you getting the systems from if imported? Yeah. Tell us about the technicalities.
So we actually do produce inverters and charge controllers in Enugu State. So we have the original designs, the original software, and the original chips that control how everything in those systems work. We've actually now gone a step further to start developing what I call the Ubuntu box. It's a novel system that allows you to redistribute power from a building like this, which is an anchor, to consumers. So we've been here now for maybe an hour, and a lot of the facilities are not currently functioning. So what's happening now is that there's excess power, right? But then just maybe 50 meters from us, there's a telecommunication mast that goes off sometimes because the diesel is finished. Now that we have excess power, we can actually sell power to that telco mast. And then when this power is not in excess, then they can then use their diesel. So it's kind of optimizing energy. And we're actually building the very first of such systems in the world in Enugu. So building products is not our problem. But then the thing is, you cannot build all products, right? So you could build, say, 1, 2, 3 kilowatts, but you can't do all the way to, say, 50, 100 kilowatts. So depending on what the scale is or what the problem is. So for some of these products, we have partnerships with different companies like DE or Jinko or JA Solar, and then we can get some of their products and also deploy. But I think beyond this, I'll take you to our factory where some of this production is done.
And that would be fantastic. In terms of downtime, do your systems experience any downtime?
So energy is very interesting, right? So it's garbage in, garbage out. So whatever you take out, you must give it back in, otherwise it's going to go off, right? So the key thing is being able to size it properly. So once it's sized properly and you do a very good energy model with like good analytics, so actually now we can even predict for you how much solar power you can have day ahead. Right. So once you do that, then you can, properly size your system. People know exactly what to use so that they have the maximum sort of utility. But I think any system can have the downtime. In the Netherlands today, about 10,000 buildings have been told that they will ration their electricity because there's more demand and they've not been able to upgrade the grid as fast as they should. So again, energy is just garbage in, garbage out. The key is proper design.
The challenges that you've encountered in the process of getting to this point, could you speak about them?
The challenges are a lot. I think for a lot of the things that my friends and I were very interested in, there was no template. We didn't have anybody to copy. We didn't have any book, any manual to read to say, this is how to do this. So at some point, we had to get used to failing. But not just failing, but sort of like failing forward. So if you made like a mistake with something, have people around you that could say, yes, you made the mistake, but you did a great job, and then this is how we'll improve this next. So I think there was that. In the beginning, finance was a problem. So it's like a very big problem. I remembered once when we were living in Transikolu, and I think it was in January, I remember very well. We all sat down together in the living room and we were like, how much is in your bank account? We went around everyone like that. I think we realized we didn't have up to 50K collectively. And we were like, man, we're all going to die of hunger if we continue like this. And it was a bit of a wake-up call. But what was more interesting is the fact that immediately after that, we started getting a lot of like really good projects. And then very quickly, everyone became, good again. So I think the challenges are about sort of the obscurity of the process. So you have to learn how to sort of now build this process. But then the opportunity that comes with that, which is very interesting, is whenever you come out of a really obscure process, you get used to obscure processes that many people cannot sort of handle. And then you get into spaces where you're basically the only person who is able to do this. I just finished doing a proposal together with really big heaters, like I'm talking McKinsey, Coolbrook, which is like a company in the Netherlands. I'm talking TLG Capital that has invested several millions of dollars in manufacturing in Africa. And I was leading this consortium. And these people probably had more years of like working experience than I had. But because I'm used to working in obscurity, then they're like, oh, we trust you to do this, right? So I think some of those challenges, again, you have to develop that grit and turn them into opportunities.
How is your work currently impacting the Southeast region? In terms of the 5 Southeast states, how would you say your work is impacting each of these states? Tell us about the magnitude of what you do.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, now we're powering an entire faculty. I said this place houses at least 3,000 students who otherwise would have no access to electricity or internet connectivity. Over the next few months, we'll be powering many of the smart schools in Enugu State. Now, each of them would have at least 1,000 students. So in the end, we'll be impacting hundreds of thousands of people, sort of quite directly as well. I mean, we do have some things in other states, like in Anambra State, we've powered some hospitals there. We've done similar in Ebonyi State as well. One of the largest fertilizer plants in Ebonyi State, like we basically manage it. Because what used to happen at the time was whenever they had downtime, they would wait for people from India or China to come and fix it. But then, yeah, like my team is fantastic.
I hope we're going to meet some members of your team in the course of this talk, because I was going to ask how you're able to manage the work, while you're away doing your PhD at Oxford, how you're able to continue to keep the ball rolling. But we'll get to that. I hope you can show us, around and let's see some of your project sites.
Yeah, 100%.